I turned 18 on a Tuesday, and that was the day I realized some decisions are made about you long before you're old enough to protest them. There was no party, no candles, just a silent dinner in our suburban house outside a quiet Midwestern city, where every clink of a fork felt like a countdown. My parents kept exchanging looks that made my skin crawl, like they were waiting for a confession to finally slip out. The food was already cold by the time it hit my plate. I pushed mashed potatoes into the same useless circle, pretending not to notice how my mother barely touched her chicken. When she finally cleared her throat, the sound cut sharper than a knife. "Ethan, come sit in the living room. We need to talk." My father was already planted in his recliner, arms folded tight, jaw locked like he was rehearsing lines. That look, the one where he tried to look authoritative and ended up looking strained, made something in my chest tighten. I sat across from them, stupidly hoping this was about congratulations, about adulthood, about something warm. I'd been working evenings at a neighborhood hardware store since I was 16. My grades were solid. I'd even been accepted into a public university with partial aid. I wasn't asking for fireworks, just acknowledgement. My mother spoke first, calm, measured, like she'd practiced in the mirror. "We want to be honest with you. We never saved anything for your college." The words landed, then echoed. Before I could even breathe, my father leaned forward. "It's not that we didn't want to," he said quickly. "We just didn't think you'd actually go anywhere, or amount to much." I laughed, not because it was funny, but because my brain refused to accept it. My mother didn't laugh back. She gave me that exhausted, almost sympathetic smile. "You were always scattered," she added softly. "Not focused like your brother." There it was. Ryan, the golden one, honors student, private soccer training since elementary school. I love him, I really do, but he's always been their investment. When he turned 16, there was a surprise party, balloons filling the driveway, a used sedan waiting like a reward. He had a college fund. I had a pair of socks and a keychain that said, "Go get 'em." I didn't raise my voice. I didn't argue. I nodded, slow and deliberate, the way you do when you're trying not to crack. "Okay," I said. "Thanks for telling me." I went to my room, shut the door, and stared at the ceiling until the darkness felt heavier than my body. That night, I applied for every scholarship I could find. I took weekend shifts at a late-night diner off the highway. I ripped phone numbers from campus bulletin boards. I tutored strangers' kids for cash. I decided I'd get there no matter what it cost. 6 months later, I'm in my second semester. I work 2 jobs, sleep comes in fragments. Sometimes I skip meals just to keep the lights on. And every few weeks, my mother texts, "You've been distant. Is everything okay?" Or worse, "We're still your family. You can't shut us out forever." As if distance wasn't taught to me. As if silence wasn't their first lesson. They still brag about Ryan's future like it's a shared accomplishment. He's not even sure what he wants yet. They handed him everything. I clawed for scraps. Last week, I went home for the first time in months. Ryan begged me. He doesn't know why things are broken, just that they are. When I stepped into the living room, my mother was showing a neighbor a photo of Ryan holding his acceptance letter, smiling like he'd won something. I stood in the doorway, unseen. She hugged me quickly, then pulled back, studying my face. "You look exhausted," she said. "If you'd just let us help, you wouldn't have to destroy yourself." I felt my jaw tighten. "Help?" I asked. Then I smiled, nodded, and swallowed the rest, because some realizations don't need words to finish them. Something snapped in me that night, quiet but permanent. I finally understood my role in their story. I wasn't the son they worried about. I was the contingency, the spare tire, the one who was supposed to fail softly enough not to embarrass them. And maybe that's what unsettled them most, that I didn't collapse when they withdrew support, that I kept moving forward without permission. They don't know how closely I've been paying attention. I remember every dollar rerouted into Ryan's future, every sentence lowered when I walked into a room, every compliment that landed crooked, sharp around the edges. I remember the way they talked about me when they thought walls were thick enough. I've been waiting, and if they think I'm distant now, they have no idea how far silence can stretch. That visit home barely lasted an afternoon, but it followed me back to my apartment like a bad smell. I couldn't shake the way my mother looked at me when she said I seemed tired, not worried, not gentle, just that faint tilt of her head, like she'd already decided the verdict. Like exhaustion was proof of poor planning. In their minds, juggling night shifts at a roadside diner and dawn hours stocking shelves wasn't determination. It was evidence. Evidence that I hadn't figured out the game the way Ryan had. Back on campus, I pushed harder, 3 double shifts in a row. A few hours of sleep on the floor, my jacket folded under my head. I still turned in a 10-page paper on time, hands shaking as I typed the last sentence. By Friday morning, the world felt distant, like I was watching it through fog. That's when my phone buzzed. A missed call. My father. He never calls. I didn't answer. I listened to the voicemail while walking home under a washed-out sky, shoes soaked, shirt reeking of burnt coffee and grease. "Hey, Ethan," he said, voice oddly upbeat. "We were wondering if you're free next weekend. Ryan's got this big showcase for his photography class. His work's being featured in the school lobby. Whole family's going. Your mom's even ordering catering. Thought it'd mean a lot if you came." Catering for a high school photo display. I stopped in the middle of the sidewalk. Suddenly, I was 16 again, standing alone outside my school's debate finals in a drizzle that soaked through my hoodie. I'd scanned the crowd until the lights shut off, phone heavy in my pocket. They'd said they were busy, errands, that it wasn't a big deal. But this was. I never called back. When the weekend arrived, I picked up an extra shift. During my break, I scrolled through my mother's social media, thumb moving slower with each post. Dozens of photos. Ryan under warm lights, framed prints behind him, smiling, laughing. Our parents beaming like proud sponsors. "So proud of our baby boy," the caption read. "Such incredible talent. We'll always be your biggest fans." I kept scrolling and found another image. Me, blurry, bent over a counter at the diner, caught mid-motion by someone who didn't bother asking. My mother had commented, "Our other son working hard, always such a trooper. No pride, no story, just a pat on the head." That's when the requests started. Not for me, from them. "Hey," my mom texted one afternoon, "Ryan's thinking of applying to the same university as you. Would you mind helping him with his application? Just some edits, guidance." The same school I bled my way into. The one I earned between exhaustion and hunger. The idea of him stepping through those gates because he liked the atmosphere sent a slow, burning heat up my spine. I waited 24 hours before replying. "Sorry," I typed finally, swamped with work and exams. And for the first time, the silence afterward felt intentional. Maybe he can ask one of his teachers. I sent that and set my phone face down. No reply. A week later, my father called again. This time, I answered, not out of hope, but curiosity. I was standing outside a discount grocery store on the edge of town, plastic bag cutting into my fingers, instant noodles rattling inside like evidence. "Hey, Ethan," he said, too casual. "Quick question. You still have your old laptop?" I stared at the cracked pavement. "Yeah," I said. "Why?" "Well, Ryan's just broke his, and we figured since you probably don't need it anymore, maybe he could use it. He's starting college applications." The words didn't hit all at once. They seeped in. "You mean the laptop I'm using right now?" I asked. "The one I write my papers on." A pause, not guilt. Calculation. "Oh, I just assumed you'd upgraded by now." I laughed, short and dry. "No, I haven't, because I can't." He didn't apologize, just that uncomfortable chuckle, like I'd inconvenienced him. "Well, when you do, let us know." That was the moment the pattern finally sharpened. I wasn't overlooked. I was inventory, useful when needed, easy to reassign. Ryan was entitled to things. I was expected to adapt, quietly, gratefully. A few days later, my body gave out. Fever, shaking chills, every joint screaming. The kind of sick that makes time stretch and your thoughts loop. I had to call out of work. That meant rent would come up short, by $40. I texted my mother, not to ask for money, just to feel acknowledged. "I'm sick, haven't slept, can't work." 3 hours later. "Oh no, feel better, drink tea. Maybe Ryan can drop off soup if he has time." He didn't. 2 days later, I dragged myself to the mailbox. Inside was a card. Cheap, glossy, a cartoon puppy on the front. Inside, a $10 bill and a sticky note. "You've always been a fighter. We believe in you. Love, Mom and Dad." I held it there, fingers numb. $10. I already knew they were buying Ryan a new camera. My father had posted about it. A professional DSLR, over $1,000. Because Ryan had an eye. That's when something went still inside me. No yelling, no tears. Just a quiet understanding. I would never be enough. Not if I crawled. Not if I bled. The harder I tried, the smaller I looked to them. I stopped replying. Let calls ring. Silence became deliberate. Then came the moment that burned everything clean. 2 weeks later, on campus, I ran into Ryan outside one of the academic buildings. He looked surprised, happy. Hey man, didn't know you had class here. I don't, I said. I'm heading to work. He frowned. Still doing the diner thing? Still paying my own way. He laughed like I'd told a joke. Then, casually, he said it. You know, Mom and Dad were actually going to help with your tuition at one point, but they thought it might make you complacent. I stopped walking. What? Yeah, he continued, oblivious. They said you needed to struggle. Like, if they gave you money, you'd stop trying. Waste it. There it was. The justification, clean, rational, cruel. He checked his phone. Anyway, I've got a meeting with the student gallery director. They're talking about giving me my own wall this spring. He walked away. The world didn't spin. It emptied, like someone had reached in and scooped something vital out. I didn't go to work that day. I walked past the diner, past the student center, past everything familiar until I found a quiet spot behind the library. I sat on the cold concrete and stared at the cracks, watching ants rush by with purpose. Ryan's words replayed, over and over. That was the moment I stopped pretending this was accidental. I didn't know what I was going to do yet, but I knew one thing with absolute clarity. This wasn't over. They decided that if they helped me, I'd rot. That support would soften me. That comfort would ruin whatever thin edge they believed I had. Meanwhile, I was grinding myself down to bone, year after year, while they stood back and reframed it as discipline. As if my exhaustion was proof of their wisdom. As if watching me suffer was some kind of parenting strategy. What surprised me wasn't the anger. That came easily. What crushed me was what sat underneath it. Shame. Not because I'd failed, but because I'd spent so long begging silently for approval from people who had already decided I wasn't worth the investment. I'd been auditioning for love that was never on offer. And once that sank in, something emptied out. That night, I went back to my apartment and stared at the pile of envelopes on the counter. Rent late by 5 days, power bill due in 48 hours. My phone buzzed weakly at 3% before going dark. I couldn't find the charger. I realized I hadn't eaten anything real since the morning before. My body felt heavy in a way rest couldn't fix. A deep, internal fatigue. I lay down on the floor because my bed was buried under clean clothes I hadn't had the strength to fold. I pulled a hoodie over my face to block the hallway light, and I stopped. 2 days vanished. No work. No class. No messages. I let my phone die. I didn't eat, didn't shower. I just existed there, unmoving, like I'd stepped halfway out of myself. A body without direction. When hunger finally clawed hard enough to pull me upright, I caught my reflection in the bathroom mirror and didn't recognize the person staring back. Pale skin, hollow eyes, dark shadows like bruises that hadn't healed. Still, I reached for my backpack. I grabbed my laptop and walked to the campus library. They'd taken a lot from me, but not that. I started small. 1 email, 1 application, 1 line added to a resume. I applied for a tutoring position on campus, then a shift-based job at the computer lab. I went to the financial aid office and asked questions I'd been too proud or too ignorant to ask before. Learned about emergency grants, short-term assistance, options that had existed the whole time. I sold old textbooks online, uploaded my chemistry notes to a study site, and started earning $10 here, $15 there. I lived on instant noodles and water refilled from library fountains. I slept in my coat because turning on the heat felt like a luxury I couldn't afford. I kept moving. I started waking up before sunrise, not because I felt rested, but because time was currency. I worked the computer lab from 6 to 9, sprinted to lectures, spent afternoons tutoring high school students over video calls in quiet study pods. I helped a freshman survive calculus in exchange for meals from his oversized dining plan. No pride, just survival. Slowly, so slowly it almost felt imaginary, I started breathing again. There's a moment I replay sometimes. It was early, around 7:45 a.m. I was sitting at the computer lab desk, peeling a banana I'd grabbed from the tutoring center's free snack table. Sunlight poured through the tall windows, catching dust in the air like it was suspended on purpose. For the first time in months, my chest didn't feel tight. I didn't feel like a disappointment. I didn't feel like I was chasing anyone's approval. I felt capable. I had built this, without them, against them. Then, unexpectedly, something broke in my favor. I got an email about a research fellowship I'd applied to weeks earlier on impulse. Paid stipend, real lab experience. I'd assumed it was a long shot. The subject line read, "Congratulations, Ethan." I read it 5 times before it felt real. 3 days later, I paid rent on time for the first time in months. And for the first time, I understood something they never would. I didn't survive because they pushed me. I survived because I stopped needing them at all. The first thing I bought was a space heater. The second was real food, vegetables, eggs, things that didn't come wrapped in desperation. I replaced my shredded backpack with a plain one I found on clearance. Nothing fancy, just functional. Then, almost without thinking, I picked up a cheap notebook from a drugstore near campus. Spiral bound, flimsy cover. I started writing again that night. Something I hadn't done since I was 15. No audience, no structure. Just words bleeding out where they'd been trapped. It didn't magically fix everything. There were still moments when bitterness crept in sideways. I'd scroll too long and land on family photos I shouldn't have looked at. Ryan posted a video of his college decision reveal. There they were, our parents clapping, crying, hugging him like he'd cured something terminal. Balloons, dinner reservations, a full slideshow of his journey. The caption read, "One down, one to go," like I was background static. But it didn't knock the air out of me the way it used to. They tried to break me. Whether they admit it or not, they stacked doubt on my shoulders, tied weight to my ankles, and pushed me into deep water. They assumed I'd sink quietly. Instead, I fought my way up, lungs burning, hands shaking, still alive. One night, sitting at my desk with a mug of actual tea warming my hands and the heater humming low in the corner, it hit me. Not loudly, just a clean, steady realization. I didn't care if they ever said they were proud. I didn't need it. I didn't need their apologies wrapped in guilt. Their praise laced with surprise, their pity disguised as concern. I had built something out of nothing, found balance in a storm they left me alone in. And somewhere along the way, the need for their approval had burned out completely. What replaced it was quieter, colder, patience, because I knew something else too. Eventually, they'd need something from me. They always did. And when that moment came, I'd be ready. Not to beg, not to explain, just to decide. By spring, I had a routine that worked. I wasn't thriving, but I wasn't drowning. That felt like a win. The research fellowship covered just enough to stop the constant panic over rent. My fridge stayed stocked. My desk didn't wobble anymore. I even had a gym pass I'd won through a scholarship raffle, proof that sometimes effort actually circled back. I still worked long hours, but I wasn't hollow. I was focused, driven, and something else had grown alongside that drive. Clarity. It started as a question that buzzed when everything went quiet. What would they have done if the roles were reversed? If I'd been the golden child and Ryan had been scraping by? Would they have let him struggle? Would they have told him suffering was motivating? Or would help have arrived instantly, unquestioned? The answer was obvious. They never expected me to win, never expected me to even stay in the race. Now that I was doing better, there was tension whenever we spoke. Sparse check-in texts from my mom, articles forwarded by my dad that barely applied to my field, selfies from Ryan's campus. None of them asked real questions. None of them knew what I was actually doing. They assumed I was still barely holding on. So I let them. I stopped posting online, let my profiles go quiet. New grants, a published research abstract, faculty recommendations. I kept all of it to myself. Not even Ryan knew. Especially not Ryan. Because around then, he started applying to my university. Same department, same program. One afternoon, I was in the tutoring center, half focused on a student's worksheet, when I heard 2 faculty assistants talking nearby. I wasn't trying to listen, but then I heard a name, Ryan Monroe. My hand stilled, my pulse spiked, and in that moment, standing there under fluorescent lights, I realized the opportunity I'd been waiting for was closer than I ever expected. I leaned closer to the shelf, pretending to straighten folders, while my ears locked onto every word. "Portfolio's solid," one of them said. "But the writing sample?" The other snorted. "Rough, all over the place. Kind of entitled, honestly." They laughed softly and moved on to the next applicant, but my face burned like I'd been caught doing something wrong. That night, curiosity gnawed at me until I gave in. I logged into the student portal, the one where peer review postings and internal applications sometimes surfaced, and searched Ryan's name. I didn't find his main application. What I did find made my stomach tighten. He'd applied for a research assistant position, the same one I'd been offered weeks earlier and turned down because my schedule was impossible at the time. And under references, my name. No warning, no message, no respect. just dropped in like a signature he assumed belonged to him. I remembered Thanksgiving, him slouched at the table, complaining about lab reports, joking about how none of it made sense. He'd laughed it off. I hadn't. I didn't confront him. Not yet. Instead, I emailed the professor running the program, Dr. Harris, and asked, casually, if the position was still available. I mentioned my schedule had opened up. He replied within the hour, enthusiastic, welcoming me back. That was step one. Step two came a week later. Ryan texted me like nothing was wrong. Hey man, just applied for the Harris RA spot. Used you as a reference. Hope that's cool. I waited 2 hours before answering. Just saw it. Hope you're ready. It's a lot of work. He replied instantly. Ha ha, yeah, but professors love me. Shouldn't be hard. I didn't respond. While he was flexing, I was scheduling a meeting. In Dr. Harris's office, I chose my words carefully. I said I supported my brother's ambition. I said I wanted him to succeed. And then I said the only thing that mattered, I couldn't, in good conscience, recommend him for a research-heavy role when he'd openly admitted to struggling with the material. No insults, no exaggeration, just facts. Dr. Harris nodded slowly. That lines up, he said. His writing sample raised concerns. Then he smiled at me. I'm glad you're back on board. This cohort needs someone like you. That sentence landed deeper than I expected. Later that week, Ryan called. His voice was tight. Did you talk to Dr. Harris? He emailed me a vague rejection, he continued. Said I wasn't the right fit. Yes, I said evenly. He asked about your work ethic. I told him what I knew. Silence stretched thin. You could have helped me, he finally said. I could have lied, I replied. That's different. He hung up. I braced for fallout. Angry calls, guilt-laced messages. Nothing came. Either he hadn't told them, or they'd decided this wasn't worth intervening in. Either way, I kept moving. Around that time, something bigger started to take shape. A side project I'd been building quietly for months. A digital tutoring platform for underfunded rural schools. It started as an assignment, then a prototype, then funding. With a friend from the business department, we pitched it. Won. Secured a small grant. 2 interns. A partnership offer from a nonprofit I'd admired from afar. My name was on everything. Not buried, not borrowed. Mine. Still, I said nothing to my family. I watched from a distance as they poured more money into Ryan's prep. New laptop, dorm furniture, a weekend retreat to clear his head. I paid off my last overdue bill and bought a secondhand suit for meetings. Quiet, unremarkable, intentional. This wasn't about proving anything anymore. It was about timing. And then, perfectly, inevitability arrived. Ryan got accepted into my university. They lost their minds when the acceptance came through. My mother left a voicemail, voice shaking, crying like something sacred had finally been restored. My father sent a group text about the boys being reunited, like it was a movie ending he'd been waiting for. Ryan texted me directly, casual, confident. Looks like I'll be crashing your turf soon. Maybe you can show me the ropes. I stared at that message longer than I should have. He had no idea what kind of ground he was stepping onto. No idea who had already mapped it, memorized every crack, every leverage point. Orientation week was coming, and I'd already volunteered. I wasn't just another upperclassman waving signs. I was on the student success panels. I had access to schedules, speaker orders, welcome packets. I knew who would be on stage, who would be in the audience, and when attention would be at its softest. If they'd spent years pretending I was invisible, I was about to show them what invisible could do when it chose to be seen. Orientation hit like controlled chaos. New students drifting with wide eyes. Parents dragging suitcases and expectations. Volunteers snapping directions through tired smiles. I was scheduled as the final speaker on the academic resilience panel. Carefully curated stories meant to reassure families that everything would be fine. The event took place in the main auditorium. Packed, loud, electric. I heard my brother before I saw him, complaining loudly about parking. Then I spotted them. Ryan in expensive sneakers. My mother in a bright cardigan. My father scanning the room like he belonged there. They didn't notice me on stage. Not yet. The moderator introduced the panel, then turned to me last, smiling. Ethan is one of our research fellows and scholarship recipients. Why don't you tell everyone how you got here? I stood, took the mic, felt my pulse steady instead of spike. Of course, I said, and then I didn't give them the polished version. I gave them the real one. I wasn't supposed to be here, I began, walking slowly across the stage. Not because I lacked ability, because I lacked support most students assume is automatic. I watched the audience shift, parents exchanging glances, my mother straightening in her seat. My younger brother is here today, I continued, eyes forward. Our parents paid for his education, bought him a car at 16, celebrated every win. I was told they didn't think I'd amount to much. The room reacted. Soft gasps, a few nervous laughs. My father's jaw tightened. I worked 2 jobs, slept in fragments, ate whatever was cheapest. Not because I was exceptional, because failure wasn't an option. I paused, found Ryan in the fourth row. He wasn't smiling. Pressure does one of 2 things, I said. It crushes you, or it sharpens you. I chose to get sharper. The moderator shifted, trying to steer me back. I smiled and gently waved her off. Sorry, this matters. I turned back to the audience. There are students here who've been told they don't belong, who were written off early. You're wrong. You belong. You don't need permission to succeed. Applause started thin, then spread. Faculty clapped. Coordinators nodded. A few parents wiped their eyes. My parents sat frozen. Ryan stared at the floor. Afterward, people came up. Students shook my hand. One mother hugged me and whispered, "My son needed that." Ryan vanished, slipped out the side doors, avoidance in motion. But I wasn't finished, because while they were reeling, while the story they told themselves was cracking in public, I still had one final card to play, and this time it wouldn't be a speech. They didn't expect what came next. That afternoon, the university hosted a private reception. Closed doors, printed invitations, security at the entrance. It wasn't for everyone. It was for families of students flagged as exceptional, academic leadership, research distinction, impact projects. Ryan wasn't invited. I was. And for the first time, I decided not to arrive quietly. I sent out 2 invitations of my own. One went to the professor who had pulled me aside years ago and treated my ideas like they mattered. The other went to a name I hadn't spoken in a decade, Mr. Caldwell, my old high school counselor, the man who once leaned back in his chair, tapped my transcript, and said college might be unrealistic for someone like me. He showed up stiff, older, hair thinning, surprise written all over his face. "Ethan," he said, shaking my hand too tightly. "Wow, you look established." "I am," I replied. Then, softer. "And I remember that conversation we had." His smile faltered. I didn't wait for a response. My parents arrived late. I could tell immediately. They were dressed for something casual. They expected folding chairs and polite applause. Instead, they stepped into a room humming with quiet money. Catering stations, donor badges, media crews setting up lights. A massive screen rotating student profiles like stock tickers. Then it landed. My name. Large, bright, impossible to miss. Ethan Monroe. Research fellow co-founder, equity tutor, Blake Foundation grant recipient, Academic Excellence Award, invited speaker Student Leadership Council, first-generation college student. I watched my mother's face freeze, the way people look when they realize they've misread a situation completely. My father blinked once, then again, like he was searching for an explanation that didn't exist. They didn't know this version of me. They never bothered to learn. I thought that might be enough. A quiet, public reckoning. But the universe wasn't finished. A journalist covering orientation week asked if I'd be willing to do a short interview. Student perseverance, resilience narrative. I agreed without thinking. The article went live 2 days later. The opening line was mine. When my parents told me they never saved for my education because they didn't believe I'd go anywhere, something broke, but something sharper replaced it. The story spread fast, faster than I expected. By the end of the week, my phone buzzed. "Ryan, you humiliated the family," he wrote. "You didn't have to air our business like that." I stared at the screen, then typed one sentence. "I didn't name anyone. If it felt personal, that's not on me." He read it, said nothing. A few days later, my mother tried calling. I let it ring. Then came the text, carefully worded, emotionally padded. "We're sorry if we ever made you feel less than. That was never our intention." I didn't answer, not out of cruelty, out of clarity. Because the truth is, this wasn't revenge. Not really. That anger just kept me moving when everything else fell apart. The real victory came quietly when I realized I didn't need their understanding or their regret. I graduated early, with honors, took a position with a national education nonprofit, moved into a small apartment with hardwood floors and a skyline view that reminded me how far I'd climbed. When graduation announcements went out, I included one thing: a photo. Me, standing in front of the auditorium, wearing the same suit from orientation week. No note, no explanation. They never replied, but I know they saw it, and that was enough. I built everything without a safety net, without reassurance, without permission. And now, when I sit across from students who've been written off too early, I don't carry that past like a wound. I carry it like proof. I was never the disappointment. They just never learned how to see.